My name is Amelia Crawford, and I'm 34 years old. If you've ever lost someone who could see the truth long before you did, you know what it feels like to grieve twice. Once for the person, and once for the parts of yourself that died because you didn't listen. The night before my mother passed, we argued over dinner, the kind of argument that hides beneath polite words and clinking cutlery. She sat at the end of her small maple wood dining table, her silver hair pinned tight, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose like a judge ready to deliver a verdict. Daniel, my boyfriend of 8 years, was explaining his latest investment opportunity. He always said it like that, as if the phrase itself was a business card. Something about a new app his friend was building, or maybe it was a crypto startup that promised to revolutionize micropayments. I can't even remember now. What I do remember is how my mother listened, not with excitement, not with curiosity, but with silence, the kind of silence that fills a room like fog. Finally, she said very softly, "Daniel, do you ever worry about what happens if your plans don't work?" He laughed, brushing it off. "That's why people invest, Margaret. High risk, high reward." She murmured, stirring her tea. "And whose reward would it be if Amelia's savings went missing in that process?" He blinked. "Excuse me?" I shot her a look. "Mom, please." She didn't even flinch. Her eyes stayed on Daniel, calm, unwavering. "I just mean," she said, "not every return is worth the risk. Sometimes the biggest gamble is trusting the wrong person." Daniel laughed again, too loudly this time, and changed the subject to the restaurant's wine list. I smiled to keep the peace, but inside, something small and sharp twisted beneath my ribs. When dinner ended and Daniel went outside to take a call, I stayed behind to help my mother with dishes. She was unusually quiet, wiping the same plate over and over. Finally, I snapped, "Could you at least try to like him?" She set the plate down and looked at me the way only mothers can, eyes soft but unrelenting. "Sweetheart," she said, "liking him isn't the problem. Trusting him is." I sighed. "You just don't understand him. He's ambitious, not greedy." "Ambition and greed wear the same suit," she said quietly. "You just have to look closely at the stitching." I remember laughing bitterly. "You always think you're 2 steps ahead of everyone." She smiled faintly. "I try to be, darling, especially when it comes to you." That was the last real conversation we ever had. A week later, she was gone. An unexpected heart attack in her garden, the one place she still found joy after Dad died. The call came at 6:47 a.m., and for the first time in my adult life, the world went silent. Daniel was surprisingly attentive those first few days. He handled the phone calls, organized the funeral arrangements, even picked out the floral wreath. He looked at me with the kind of steady sympathy that could almost make you forget what he wanted from you. The funeral was beautiful. Too beautiful, maybe. I remember the smell of lilies and rain, the way the priest's voice cracked on the words, "a life of integrity." My mother's colleagues from the accounting firm she'd worked at for 30 years stood in a row, faces streaked with tears. Her book club friends brought brownies, because Margaret would have wanted that. After everyone left, I sat in her living room surrounded by her things, stacks of journals, meticulously labeled envelopes, the faint smell of rose soap. Daniel was pacing behind me, muttering something about how we'd need to sort out the estate. I nodded, numb. I couldn't hear much beyond the echo of her last words. Ambition and greed wear the same suit. In the weeks that followed, I buried myself in work. I couldn't bear to pack her belongings yet, so I visited the house often, dusting shelves, watering plants, pretending she'd walk through the door any minute. One gray afternoon, a letter arrived. Heavy envelope, crisp lettering. The return address read, "Patterson and Green, Attorneys at Law." I opened it with trembling hands. "Dear Ms. Crawford, please contact our office at your earliest convenience regarding your late mother's estate. Certain matters require your presence." I felt the world tilt slightly. Estate, presence. Words that sounded important and terrible all at once. When I told Daniel, his eyes lit up. Just for a second, barely noticeable if I hadn't been watching him. He wrapped me in a hug. "Baby, she wanted you to have peace. Maybe this will finally give you that." But peace wasn't what I felt. The next morning, I drove downtown to meet Mr. Patterson. His office was all dark wood and glass, the kind of place where the air itself felt expensive. He greeted me kindly, his voice low and deliberate. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," he said. "Thorough, private, prepared." He slid a thick folder across his desk. "She left everything to you, her house in Maplewood, her accounts, and a set of investments that have grown considerably. How much? I asked, barely above a whisper. He hesitated, then turned the folder around. Roughly $650,000. The number didn't make sense. My mother had lived modestly. Coupon clipping, secondhand coats, the same sedan for 15 years. She planned for you, he added gently, far more than she let on. I left the office in a daze, the folder on the passenger seat like a sleeping animal that might wake and bite. My fingers itched to call Daniel, to tell him, to share the shock. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the faint echo of her voice. Look closely at the stitching. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the folder. The numbers, the legal terms, the cold precision of it all. My mother had built a fortress for me, brick by invisible brick. When Daniel came home, I finally told him. His face lit up like a struck match. Amelia, that's incredible, he said, wrapping me tightly. Your mom knew what she was doing. She wanted to make sure you'd never struggle again. For a moment, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "We'll finally be okay." But as he walked away to grab his phone, I caught his reflection in the mirror, his smile small, secret, calculated. And for the first time since Mom died, I felt afraid. The morning after I told Daniel about the number, 650,000, he brought me coffee in my favorite mug, the one with the hairline crack that looks like a river on a map. He set it on my nightstand like an offering and kissed my temple as if the tenderness itself had a price tag. We should celebrate, he said softly. Not today. Today can be about your mom, but soon. I wanted to be grateful. I wanted his warmth to feel clean. Instead, something inside me waited, like a bird perched and listening for thunder. Celebration, it turned out, meant ideas. They arrived like pop-up ads I hadn't learned to block. First, the car. We could finally get you out of that Corolla, he said, scrolling on his phone while we stood at the kitchen counter. There's a certified pre-owned Lexus at the Evanston dealership. Safety ratings are insane. You deserve something quiet, something that doesn't rattle. My car's fine, I said. Fine is for people who can't do better, he teased, smiling like this was playful. Besides, it's not a splurge. It's smart. Resale value. Reliability. He'd learned how to say smart like a password. Next, the healing vacation. I found this place in the Hamptons, he said that weekend, laptop open, photos of shingled houses looking like they smelled of money and sea salt. Right on the bay. 2 months. You could read in the mornings, and I could finally write that pitch deck without distractions. Fresh air, long walks, sunsets that turn you into a poet. Your mom would want you to rest. I don't think my mom's definition of rest involved a $20,000 rental. He laughed. You're exaggerating. I wasn't. Then came the idea that sounded like love, a home that actually fits you. We drove to open houses we hadn't planned to attend. Daniel ran his hand along marble countertops like he was petting a purebred. Imagine hosting book club here, he said, voice dipped in honey. Imagine Christmas. We could start new traditions. I pictured my mother at the tiny maplewood table, her hands around a chipped mug, and felt myself drift back to shore. Let's not rush. He nodded, lips pressed into patience. Of course, we won't rush. But the ideas kept coming. Season tickets to the Cubs, a country club membership because networking, a home espresso machine that cost more than my first car because grief, apparently, tastes better with microfoam. Between suggestions, he held me when I cried, stroked my hair, said the gentlest things. Support braided with sales pitch. I started to understand that love and leverage can share a voice. At night, when the house quieted and the refrigerator hummed like a low threat, I'd sit with my mother's folder. Lists, tabs, a color-coded index. Margaret Crawford had planned her life the way surgeons plan incisions. Precise, bloodless, necessary. There were sections I couldn't make myself read yet. One was labeled Access. I told myself I needed more time. A week after the meeting with Mr. Patterson, I had dinner with Tiffany, my friend since high school, the person who never used euphemisms when a blade would do. We sat on her apartment balcony with cheap wine that tasted like grapes pretending to be better things. How's Daniel? She asked carefully. Helpful, I said. Generous. Thoughtful. The words fell flat like dull knives. She took a sip. And? He has ideas. About your grief or your money? Same thing if you ask him. Tiffany stared past me at the city lights. Your mom never liked him. She never said that. She didn't need to. We let the silence sit a while. A siren cut through it, then faded, leaving us with only the clink of our rings on the wine glasses. Maybe give yourself a rule, Tiffany said. No decisions for 3 months. If he loves you, he'll respect that. If he loves something else, he won't. I nodded. That seems fair. When I told Daniel about the rule, he smiled like a man who'd just learned a different route to the same destination. 3 months, he agreed easily. We'll dream now. Decide later. Dreaming, it turned out, had a shopping cart. The next few days arrived wrapped in small dissonances. Daniel left investment articles open on my laptop, tabs about low-hanging fruits, and post-liquidity lifestyle alignment. He sent me Zillow listings at 1 a.m. with captions like, "You'd look radiant in this kitchen." He forwarded a limited-time membership discount at a golf club he didn't belong to and offered to split the cost, which, given the math, meant I'd be paying it. Little things started to loosen around the house, the screws that hold a life together. Dirty plates, forgotten. Texts that pinged and flipped over, face down. Calls taken in the hallway he used to take on the couch. He'd come back saying, "Work," but work doesn't usually say, "Hey," that many times in a row. I told myself to stop noticing. One Thursday, I drove to Maplewood to water the garden. Her tomatoes had outlived her on principle. I pulled weeds the way I used to pluck eyebrows. Careful, ruthless, and found her kneeling pad exactly where she'd left it. I knelt, pressed my fingers into the dirt, and said out loud, "How did you know?" In my pocket, my phone buzzed. "Daniel, grabbing drinks with Ryan from work. Don't wait up. Love you." Love you looked different in daylight. I drove home just after 10. Our building's hallway always smells like someone else's dinner and someone else's laundry. As I reached our door, I heard Daniel's voice, low, thrilled, the way he sounds when he's winning. It took me a second to place the tone. It was the tone from poker nights, from successful pitches, from air hockey in a bar when the other guy runs out of quarters. "I'm telling you," he whispered. "Once this clears, we're set." A pause I could feel like a hand around my throat. "No, she's on board. She just needs time. Her mom died, Mel. You can't push a grieving person. It looks bad." I didn't realize I'd dropped my keys until the sound of metal on tile ruined the sentence. The talking stopped. The door opened. Daniel stood there in his socks and an unbuttoned shirt, hair still damp from a shower. His eyes flicked from me to the hallway and back. "Hey," he said, too bright. "You scared me. Who's Mel?" "Ryan's girlfriend," he said instantly. She was with him at the bar." "My mom died, so you can't push me," I said, the words tasting like someone else's mouth. "It looks bad." He blinked, then smiled like he'd spotted a chess move I hadn't. "You misheard. Come in, you're shaking." He took my elbow, guided me inside, shut the door with a soft click a prison understands well. I was shaking, but not from cold. "Amelia," he said gently, "you're exhausted. You think everyone's out to get you because you've been holding your grief alone. We're a team, remember?" He reached for my face. I stepped back. His hand suspended in air, a gesture that suddenly looked like reaching for a doorknob he no longer owned. I heard what I heard, and I said what I said. He kept his voice even, which made it worse. "I'm trying to plan for us, for when the dust settles. I was telling Ryan that once the estate clears and the paperwork's done, we can take a vacation, buy a car, join a club, pick a house, drink the future with a straw." I swallowed. "Who is Mel?" He held my stare, then looked down, then up again with the face he saves for negotiations. "She's nobody. Nobody always has a name. We slept like strangers, backs staged for an audience." Around 3, I woke to the light of his phone on the comforter. A text thread glowed like an open wound. I didn't pick it up. I read only what the notifications allowed. Melissa. "You promised." Melissa. "Waiting is killing me." Melissa. "Call me." I watched the screen dim, the way fireflies decide when you've seen enough. In the morning, Daniel made pancakes. He whistled while he flipped them. He drew a smiley face with syrup on my plate and called me Sunshine. I cut the pancake into squares that didn't taste like food and said I needed to go to Maplewood to meet the appraiser. "Appraiser?" he asked too quickly. "For the house," I lied. I just needed to be somewhere the walls remembered different words. He kissed the air near my cheek. "We'll talk tonight," he said, as if talk is a solvent. I drove to Maplewood and didn't stop at the house. I parked outside Patterson and Green and watched people go in and out, immaculate in suits that did not admit error. When I finally went up, the receptionist looked at me with the kindness reserved for people carrying breakable things. "Do you have an appointment, Ms. Crawford?" "I don't," I said, "but I need 5 minutes with Mr. Patterson. I need him to show me something." She disappeared and returned like Mercy. "He'll see you." In his office, I didn't sit. I didn't say the name Melissa. I said the name Margaret. It steadied me. There were sections in my mother's folder I couldn't read, I said. I think I should read them now. He nodded and slid the folder back to the center of the desk as if returning a mirror I'd been avoiding. His fingers found a tab marked Access. He unfolded a page with the kind of care people usually reserve for flags and shrouds. Your mother anticipated pressure, he said, voice quiet. She wanted your choice to be free, not bought. I took the paper. The words blurred, then focused, then sharpened into knives I could name. I didn't read it all. I didn't need to. A single sentence rose to the surface like a survivor. No partner, cohabiting companion, or third party shall access, manage, or benefit from the estate, and distribution shall be delayed while my daughter is in any cohabiting romantic relationship. Access shall commence upon legal certification of separation of households. My mother, 2 steps ahead, not cruel, not controlling, just certain. The page trembled, or maybe I did. Outside, the day was so bright it felt sarcastic. I drove home with the paper on the seat beside me, like a passenger who wasn't finished speaking. Daniel was on the couch, phone to his ear, voice low. When he saw the folder, he hung up without goodbye. Everything okay? He asked. I held his gaze until the silence turned into gravity. We need to talk tonight, I said, echoing his morning. After dinner. He smiled, relieved. Good. I was afraid you'd stay mad. I'm not mad, I said, and realized it was true. I'm awake. That evening, I cooked spaghetti because routine can be armor. He poured wine like it was forgiveness. We ate, and he told a story about work that might have been funny yesterday. When the plates were empty, I stood, went to the fireproof safe, and took out my mother's folder. I set it on the table beside the candle we'd forgotten to light. Amelia, he said, warning folded in my name. Later, I said, look closely at the stitching. He didn't understand, not yet. He would. I'm tired, I said, and I was. Let's sleep. We went to bed like actors hitting marks. He fell asleep quickly, confident men do. I lay awake and listened to the city pass our windows, a tide of strangers returning to their own secrets. At 2:11 a.m., another text lit the room. Melissa. Did you tell her? My throat closed around the answer. I turned to the window and saw my reflection. My mother's mouth, my own eyes, the woman she raised inside them finally stepping forward. Tomorrow, I whispered to the glass, to the garden she can't tend, to the queen who always plans her exits. Tomorrow we stop pretending. Morning arrived, like a lie you weren't ready to tell. Daniel stood by the counter, shirtless, pouring coffee into his favorite mug, the one I bought him after his first promotion. The mug said, "World's best idea guy." I used to think it was a joke between us. Now it sounded like evidence. He smiled, as if the night hadn't happened, as if the words, "Did you tell her?" hadn't lit our room like a flare. Morning, sunshine, he said. You were tossing in your sleep. Bad dream? I took the coffee from him, my hands steady in ways that scared me. Something like that. He kissed the top of my head. His lips were warm, but his eyes were calculating, a man checking numbers in a ledger only he could see. For the next few days, Daniel's kindness became a script he recited flawlessly. Flowers on the table, texts in the middle of meetings. Thinking of you. Small gifts to cheer me up. A new perfume. A silk scarf in my favorite color. A dinner reservation at a restaurant we used to say was too fancy for us. Every gesture meant to erase memory, but it didn't. Because every time I looked at him, I saw that text. Did you tell her? By the fourth day, I realized we were actors in a slow-motion play about silence. Our lines rehearsed, our exits scheduled. Then one night, the play broke. Daniel came home late, again. The smell of whiskey hit the air before he even shut the door. Hey, I said quietly, not looking up from my laptop. You said you'd be home by 7. It's 9:30, he said. Don't make it sound dramatic. I made dinner. Then you should have eaten. The way he said it, not cruel, just absent, made me colder than shouting ever could. He dropped onto the couch, untied his shoes with sharp, impatient movements, then reached for the remote. I met with the appraiser today, I said. That got his attention. His head snapped toward me. Appraiser? For Mom's house. I'm deciding whether to keep it or sell. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Sell. Obviously sell. We could use that money for something that actually improves our lives. Our lives, I repeated, my tone deliberate. He didn't notice. Think about it. Invest in something bigger. You've got all this capital sitting around. Let's put it to work. Let's, I echoed, setting my coffee cup down a little too firmly. He smiled. I'm not saying I'd control it. I'm just saying we should decide together? Exactly. I closed my laptop, looked him dead in the eye. Daniel, whose name is on the inheritance? His smile froze just slightly. What kind of question is that? A legal one. He blinked. Amelia, we're partners. You're not my client. Maybe not, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm your investment. He laughed. That careful, layered laugh that men use when they think they can charm their way back into your blind spot. You're overthinking again. You've been different lately. Suspicious. I get it. Grief messes with people. I'm not suspicious, I said softly. I'm observant. The silence that followed stretched until it hurt. He stood up. You know what? I'm not doing this tonight. I'm going to sleep. In the guest room? He stopped halfway down the hall. What's that supposed to mean? You've been sleeping there all week. Easier to text Melissa without me noticing, I guess. He turned, face pale. Excuse me? I saw the messages. He didn't deny it, not right away. His jaw clenched, and something behind his eyes flickered. Not guilt, but calculation. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and almost pitying. You don't know what you saw. I know exactly what I saw. He sighed, the sound theatrical. You're grieving, Amelia. You're twisting things. You're projecting your mother's paranoia onto us. Don't bring her into this. He stepped closer, his expression shifting from calm to sharp in an instant. She never liked me. She made sure you'd doubt me the minute she couldn't control you anymore. That's not true. Isn't it? He snapped. She's still running your life even now, through her money, her lawyer, her stupid conditions. You think you're independent, but she's got you on a leash from the grave. I stared at him, feeling something inside me go still. Not broken, just still, like a lake after a stone sinks. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm enough to make him step back. You're right about one thing, I said. She did plan things carefully, more carefully than you can imagine. He frowned, confused by the softness of my tone. What are you talking about? You'll see. The next morning, Daniel was suddenly attentive again, making breakfast, texting from work, asking if I needed anything. It was the same old rhythm, but I recognized it now. Damage control disguised as devotion. That night, I couldn't stand the pretense anymore. I called my best friend Tiffany. He's unraveling, I said, and I'm tired of pretending I don't see it. Then stop pretending, she said simply. I need to be smart. You're your mother's daughter, she said. Be strategic, not scared. The words anchored me. So I began to gather things, not belongings, but proof. I printed the email exchange with the lawyer, the will clause, the text thread from Melissa that I'd quietly screenshotted before deleting from Daniel's phone when he left it charging. I put everything in my mother's folder in the section marked Access. By the end of the week, Daniel started sleeping at home again. Not out of love, but because I think he felt the balance shifting and wanted to keep an eye on me. His new strategy was guilt. One night over takeout, he looked at me with tired eyes and said, I'm trying, Amelia, but you've shut me out. You don't even touch me anymore. Maybe because I don't recognize you. He set down his chopsticks. You think I'm some monster who's after your money, but I'm just trying to build a life with you. Don't you see that? I see you trying to build a life on me, not with me. He exhaled sharply, pushing away his plate. You're impossible to love when you're like this. And you're impossible to trust when you're like this. The words hung in the air like glass shards. Neither of us moved to clean them up. He left the table and slammed the bedroom door. The sound echoed through the house like a warning. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, the one he'd claimed as his, staring at the ceiling. The pattern of shadows from the window blinds looked like bars across my chest. I thought about my mother, about how she'd always said, don't fight fire with fire, sweetheart. Just make sure you're standing where the wind's in your favor. And suddenly, I knew what she meant. The next morning, I called Mr. Patterson. I'm ready, I said. Ready for what? He asked. To initiate the clause. There was a pause, long and careful. Are you sure, Amelia? This will change things permanently. I glanced toward the living room, where Daniel's jacket hung on the chair, his phone charger snaking across the table, the space where our life used to fit. Yes, I said, I'm sure. That evening, when Daniel came home, I made spaghetti and meatballs, his favorite meal, the one I used to make when we were happy. He sat down, smiled, poured 2 glasses of wine. Maybe we needed this, he said, reaching for my hand. I smiled back. Maybe we did. He didn't notice the folder on the counter behind me, the one with my mother's name embossed in gold. Because I was finally standing where the wind was in my favor. The kitchen smelled like tomato sauce and endings. Daniel twirled his fork, oblivious. The candlelight softened his features, blurring the man who had once made me laugh with the stranger who had counted my worth in dollars. He swallowed, leaned back in his chair, and said the line he must have rehearsed in his head 100 times. I think we should separate, Amelia. There it was, flat, practiced, efficient. The kind of sentence that lands like a blade wrapped in velvet. I set my fork down carefully. Separate? His tone was neutral, as if we were discussing a furniture return. It's just not working. We want different things. You've changed since your mom died. I've changed. Maybe it's time to admit it. I could have cried. I could have begged. I could have asked the questions that don't deserve answers. When did you stop loving me? Who are you now? Was any of it real? But instead, I smiled. The quiet, deliberate kind that my mother used to give right before she won an argument without raising her voice. Okay, I said softly, but before you start packing, there's something you should know. He blinked, surprised by my calmness. What? I stood, walked to the counter, and retrieved the leather folder. The gold lettering caught the light. My mother left instructions. I've been meaning to show you. His posture straightened. His eyes flicked toward the folder like a moth toward flame. What kind of instructions? He asked, his voice careful, curious. I placed the folder in front of him, flipped it open, and turned to the marked page, the one labeled Access. Read the highlighted part. He glanced down. At first, his expression stayed blank, the kind of blank that hides calculation. Then, slowly, confusion began to take root. His lips moved silently as he reread the line, and when comprehension finally arrived, the color drained from his face. He looked up at me, his voice unsteady. This says you can't access the inheritance while you're living with a partner. Correct. And if we separate, then I can. He stared at the page like it was written in another language. So, if we break up, you get everything. And if we don't, then the entire estate goes to charity, I finished for him. The room went still except for the soft hiss of the candle wick. You're lying, he said finally. This can't be legal. It's airtight. My mother consulted multiple estate lawyers. Mr. Patterson confirmed it yesterday. Daniel's hand tightened around the edge of the folder. She did this to punish me. No, I said. She did this to protect me. He laughed. Sharp. Ugly. From what? From me? You think I'm some kind of gold digger? Do I need to answer that? His face reddened. This is insane. She's been dead for months, and she's still manipulating you from the grave. Maybe, I said. But she was right about you. He shoved back his chair, standing so fast it scraped the tile. You can't do this. I have rights. I picked up the will, folded it neatly, and slid it back into the folder. Not to inherited assets, you don't. Illinois law doesn't recognize joint ownership of conditional estates. His breath came out uneven. You've been planning this. I looked at him, really looked, and realized I'd stopped being afraid. No, Daniel, she planned this. I just finally learned how to read the instructions. He stood there for a long time, his fists opening and closing, like he was debating whether anger or pleading would work better. Finally, he exhaled through his teeth and switched tactics. His voice softened. Amelia, listen. I overreacted. I said separate because I was frustrated. We've both been under stress. We can fix this. I tilted my head. Now that you know separation means losing everything? He hesitated. That's not what I meant. But it's what you felt. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said quietly. You made your choice before you opened that folder. His arm fell. For a second, I saw panic flash behind his eyes, the realization that the safety net he thought he'd spun was actually a web closing around him. You don't want to do this, he said. You'll regret it. You'll end up alone. I gave a small, tired smile. I've been alone for months, Daniel. You just happened to be in the room. He stared at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something that looked like fear. Not of losing me, but of losing access. I turned off the stove, drained the spaghetti water into the sink, and spoke without looking at him. You can stay in the guest room for a few nights while you figure things out. But we're done. He didn't move. You're serious? Completely. The smell of the overcooked sauce filled the silence between us. Finally, he grabbed his keys and walked toward the door. You'll regret this, he said again, but it sounded smaller this time, like he already knew it was a lie. When the door closed, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The house went quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet that used to sit between us, but a lighter kind, a breathing kind. I cleaned the table, washed the dishes, and placed the folder back in the safe where it belonged. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen counter. Outside, the wind rattled the maple tree against the window. I thought about the last time my mother and I had played chess, the night before her heart attack. She'd beaten me in 6 moves. I remember groaning, laughing, and accusing her of cheating. She'd smiled, eyes sparkling. "The queen always survives," she said, "but only when she plans her exits." At the time, I thought she was talking about the game. Now I understood. She hadn't just planned her own exit, she'd planned mine too. Out of Daniel's orbit, out of the small, false world I'd built around his charm. And just like that, I felt her beside me again, not as a ghost, but as the quiet certainty in my chest that I was finally standing exactly where she'd wanted me to be. I raised the glass toward the ceiling and whispered, "Checkmate, Mom." 3 months later, the world had gone quiet in the right ways. Daniel moved out the week after our conversation. He tried to play reasonable at first, asked if we could pause things, take a break instead of breaking up. When that didn't work, he turned bitter, called me cold, said I'd let my mother win. He wasn't wrong. By the time the divorce-style paperwork was finalized, simple since we were never married, he'd already learned the hard way what it meant to go up against Margaret Crawford's foresight. His lawyer confirmed what Mr. Patterson had told me. There were no loopholes, no gray areas, no claims he could make. Every clause, every contingency, every conditional phrase had been tied tighter than a sailor's knot. He left with nothing but his car, his clothes, and the story he'd have to tell himself to sleep at night. As for me, I didn't touch the money right away. For a while, I just wanted to breathe without counting seconds between someone else's moods. I sold our apartment downtown, the one we'd once called our dream place. I couldn't stand the sight of the kitchen counter where he'd planned my future. Instead, I bought a small craftsman house in Evanston, just 20 minutes from Maplewood, a home with big front windows and a porch that creaks in the morning. I filled it with quiet things: books, sunlight, lavender candles, the ticking of an old clock from my mother's living room. It took time to relearn the art of stillness, to eat without waiting for someone to criticize my appetite, to sleep without the hum of tension in the air, to walk through a house that no longer listened for another person's footsteps. I planted tomatoes in the backyard, the same variety my mother used to grow. The first green fruit appeared in late July, small and stubborn, and I cried when I saw it. Some nights I'd sit on the porch with a glass of wine and talk to her like she was just inside. "You were right," I'd say softly. "You were always right." And somehow I'd swear I could feel the air shift, like the wind itself was proud of me. Eventually I started rebuilding. Not a relationship, not yet, but a life. I left the marketing agency where I'd spent years being underpaid and overpromised. The inheritance gave me something money rarely buys: freedom. I started freelance consulting. Smaller projects, smarter clients, my own hours. I worked less, but earned more peace than I'd ever thought possible. Tiffany came over one night with takeout and wine, laughing when she saw the half-unpacked boxes. "You finally did it," she said. "You made a home that's yours." I smiled. It took a small war. "Your mom would be proud." "She already is," I said. "She just planned her applause early." We laughed until we cried. That winter, I took my first solo trip, Italy, the one I'd always dreamed about, but Daniel had called impractical. I wandered through Florence, ate pasta on balconies, stood beneath frescoed ceilings that made me dizzy with beauty. At the Uffizi Gallery, I saw a painting of a queen holding a chess piece, her hand steady, her expression calm, almost amused. The plaque said she represented foresight. I stared for a long time, then whispered, "I know her." When I came home, I framed the last photo I ever took with my mother, the two of us in her garden, sunlight washing everything gold. It sits on the mantel next to her will, both reminders of what protection really looks like. Sometimes Daniel texts me, usually late at night. "I miss you. I'm sorry. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I don't reply, because I know he doesn't miss me. He misses what I represented: security, stability, a future already financed. What he doesn't understand is that I inherited more than money. I inherited a map, a strategy, a kind of love that saw the storm coming long before I felt the rain. And that, more than anything, saved me. On the anniversary of her death, I drove to Maplewood. Her house has new owners now, a young couple with a golden retriever and wind chimes that sing on breezy days. I didn't knock. I just stood by the gate and whispered, "Thank you." When I got back to my car, I noticed something tucked inside my mother's old gardening book that I'd brought along. A note in her handwriting, one I must have missed before. My darling Amelia, if you're reading this, it means life tested you the way I feared it might. Remember, love without respect is a loan that never gets repaid. Build a life you own. Mom. I pressed the note to my chest, and for a moment I felt her there, not as a ghost, but as the calm inside my ribs. That evening, I sat in my garden with a cup of coffee. The sunset brushed the sky in orange and rose, my mother's favorite colors. The wind stirred the tomato vines, soft and sure. I raised my cup to the fading light. "Checkmate, Mom," I whispered. And for the first time in a long while, I laughed. Not bitterly, not brokenly, but free. Because Daniel thought he was playing the game, but it turns out my mother had already won.